I think people need to utilize AI to be able to make their job easier rather than standing and taking a step back from it, especially with integrations and automations and having, if you automatically upload a CV, they automatically get sent an intro email, for example. And these things are going to completely be able to that shift from admin to actually being able to sort of put a bit of a difference into it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I automated so much in sort of an ATS we were using to a point where tests were sent automatically if they were in a certain stage, results came back, and hiring managers are automatically notified if the results were hitting the mark or not, and sort of moving them across to the next stage. You know, some people would argue it takes away a bit of the human element here, but really, if you think about it, if you put the time and effort into your templates and really make those feel as human as possible, then it doesn't lose that touch.
Yeah, because the template itself is still created from you and the business and the values, the vision you're wanting your employee to be. It's not like you could go completely the opposite way, as you said, and have AI write all of that. But then it's like, is that then taking away that human element? So I think if you can implement the human element and make that automated, I think that's definitely. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Freedom of Work podcast. I am with Jag and we are going to be talking all about is HR dead and why people ops is the future. So hi, welcome Jag. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So the topics we're going to be going through today are the evolution from HR to people ops as a strategic business function, and the future of work. So what is next for people ops? And a little bit more about Jag. So he is a people ops leader with around 10 years of experience with tech startups and scale-ups, specialising in seed to Series B startups and scale-ups. So he started his career in technical recruitment, where me and Jag actually met a few years back. And he moved into HR and then into operations. So since then, he's been using a mixture of skill sets to help forge a movement in people operations and finally get into where he is now. So, Jag, yes, let's get into it then. If there's anything that you sort
of course, let's go for it. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you very much.
Amazing. So, moving into that first topic then. So, this big evolution of HR to people ops, what people are starting to sort of look at now. It's not just all about this classic HR, traditional admin, onboarding. It's completely gone past that and sort of looking at now how that can be completely restyled. So if you want to sort of give us a little bit of a definition or difference of what you think the difference of HR and people ops actually is.
Yeah, of course. So I guess the caveat here is, in different sized organizations or different geographies around the world, it might be a little bit different. But for me, at least, the clue is in the name, right? So from my perspective, people ops takes a more operational approach to HR. It takes a more holistic approach to, I guess, the overall employee experience and journey.
Yeah, great. I think that it really is that shift towards the holistic approach and looking at the journey from when someone's initially even applying to a job to actually getting onboarded and that sort of thorough journey, as you said. And I really do think this is what is next in the world of HR. So why do you think this shift has happened and what do you think is driving that?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I think, like all change, it sort of comes from necessity, right? So startups and scale-ups, I guess, needed a function that did more and that wasn't siloed because, traditional HR, I think, is very siloed. It only works within its own strict confines. And I guess because of, that need to sort of expand out of that, it was inevitable, right? as we constantly look to improve functions across the whole organization, it was inevitable that change came to HR, and there was a need for it to do more. And finally, I think maybe AI has been a huge catalyst in I guess the movement to people ops.
Yeah, definitely. I think technology and even remote working all sort of like combines into this employee experience. And yeah, especially remote working, if someone's on board and they're just sat in their bedroom and there's just no further engagement and there's no more like trying to keep them there, then that is never going to work, especially
yeah,
in a remote
absolutely.
working environment. Definitely. So I think as we sort of look at this then as an overall business function and how we strategically can use people ops instead of the HR side of things. Obviously, we're not saying HR is dead, or is it? But so we want to be moving beyond these admin tasks and focusing on this employee experience and engagement. How do you sort of think people ops is moving beyond these admin tasks and focusing on this true experience of being an employee at an organization?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, first of all, I don't think HR is dead. I think HR should, be reinvented in another sort of light or another way of working. But to answer your question, I guess we sort of briefly talked about it earlier, and I think the two main things here are sort of automations and AI, right? So if we sort of go down the automations route, I feel like, as we properly start to utilize tech platforms, such as your ATS, your HRIS, your benefits platform, if you have one, your payroll platform, your document storage, your wiki, as we properly utilize these platforms, and we properly understand the integrations and automations are already in there, we understand that there are so many boring, repetitive tasks that we do, busy work, admin, overhead, whatever you want to call it, that these platforms or automations can actually do for us, right? And then that frees us up to sort of think of bigger picture things and focus on more important problems to solve, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think people need to utilize AI to be able to make their job easier rather than standing and taking a step back from it, especially with integrations and automations and having, if you automatically upload a CV, they automatically get sent an intro email, for example. And these things going to completely be able to that shift from admin to actually being able to sort of put a bit of a difference into it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I automated so much in sort of, an ATS we were using, to a point where tests were sent automatically if they were in a certain stage, results came back, and hiring managers are automatically notified if the results were hitting the mark or not, and sort of moving them across to the next stage. Some people would argue it takes away a bit of the human element here, but really, if you think about it, if you put the time and effort into your sort of templates and really make those feel as human as possible, then it doesn't lose that touch.
Yeah, because
And
the template itself is still created from you and the business and the values and the vision that you're wanting your employee to be. It's not like you could go completely the opposite way, as you said, and have AI write all of that. But then it's like, again, is that then taking away that human element? So I think if you can implement the human element and make that automated, I think that's definitely.
yeah, and that's a great sort of that's a great point you made. Sort of, my second point is AI, right? So using AI as a bit of a cheat code to, write things like policies or procedures. I'm not saying, get AI to write your whole handbook. I'm saying sort of, get it to help you get 50%, 60% there, and that's when your expertise comes in. Sorry, when you're fine tuning those things, So yeah, I think AI is great for that side of things. Again, that frees you up as a department, as a function, sorry, to sort of think of those bigger picture things, or helping with self-serving in the organization. So what do I mean by that? Well, I always sort of ask when I sort of go in and do my sort of consultancy piece with sort of existing teams, I sort of ask, are people asking the same questions, such as what's the holiday policy, what's this policy, or what's that policy? If they're asking the same questions over and over again, it means something's not right or something's not working, right? So if you can shift your policies into a platform, like for example Notion or whatever platform you're using, there's most probably an AI function in there where it reads your policies and procedures, and employees can self-serve and sort of say, well, what is the holiday policy? And the AI will come back and sort of, just regurgitate really in a friendly manner what that policy is. So if you're using automations and AI, you're taking away a lot of the drudgery that is sort of, I guess, plagued in HR by HR teams, historically. And what this means is you can take a systems thinking approach or a first principles approach, to sort of solving these really interesting problems that you will have in your organization. And this requires deep thinking, right? And you need time for this. You can't just sort of say, right, I'm going to solve this problem and I'll do it in the next 30 minutes because I've got somebody asking me what the holiday policy is, So it takes a few hours for you to get into the environment, get your brain in the right sort of zone, and go out to stakeholders and figure things out. So using AI, and using automations, that frees you up to sort of solve these very interesting problems that you're very valuable for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you said, if people are asking these questions, what holidays do I have? How do I find my benefits? Then you're not doing the onboarding right. So you've done maybe the easy part of saying, hey, yeah, you've got the job. But that's the part that people want is, what is my salary? What is my benefits? Like, if they want a job, they will want the job. But if they don't know anything else about it, it's hard to want people. And especially, as I was saying, in like a remote first world at the moment, the landscape and how many candidates are actually applying for each role at the moment, if it's a remote only role, I think it's over thousands that you see now on LinkedIn. And if they're applying, but they're getting to a point and then the HR process doesn't even showcase what benefits they have, then people are going to start pulling out. And you can offer so much, but if you're not sort of doing it past a point, then you're going to not be able to retain people, because people will join and think everything's all good and well. But if the second you don't know how to find what your benefits are, or if the company is actually going to benefit you or progress you or give you flexibility, or you're going to receive a laptop, if you don't know those things, then the drop rate of hiring compared to losing people is going to be like catastrophic, really. And I think that's exactly why, with this strategic function of people ops, you do need to utilize data as well. As you said, automation, but seeing like questionnaires, are people happy? Is there anything that you can improve? When you first started, I think these surveys are really good. When you first started, is there anything that you would like to improve with the process? So without these things, you can't sort of move forward and get that process to be better.
Yeah, I think there's two things you hit on very perfectly, actually, which is data and documentation. I think people ops lends itself really well to data and documentation. And as you said, look at the data, where what's happening, with people's onboarding, for example, are they not up to speed within the given time frame? Are we collecting the data in the first instance? Are the one-on-ones happening? All these things are so important, especially when you are remote first or hybrid, for example. And the documentation comes in with, right, okay, do we have a set process in place? are these things happening? The power of checklists, like, for example, if someone's a line manager, is there the correct documentation to show somebody, like, this is what we expect from a line manager? You need to check in with people X times per week in their first week or first month, and once a week in your one-on-ones, for example. There is a set documentation for this, and I think people ops lends itself really well to that, because if you start digging into the operational side of people ops, you are naturally more inclined to sort of just document as much as you can, and use your platforms to sort of bolster that procedure by by the automations that we spoke about.
Yeah, I think timelines are definitely something that maybe isn't considered as much. Maybe people think about the email side of things and that, but timelines is, as you said, is definitely something to look at, because most people, if they're applying for a job, they maybe have 3, 4, 5 applications or interviews on the go. But if one company's timelines haven't been discussed and nobody knows what the next stages are or how to proceed in a fast way, then, as you said, that candidate's going to completely go off the market. And because you didn't have your processes and timelines in place, and the line manager didn't have the documentation of people to what to follow, then yeah, you're going to lose out on like that top talent. So yeah, as you said, timelines. And people go into an interview and say, "Oh, do you have any more interviews?" And they're like, "Oh no, this is my only one." And then in the back of their mind, they're thinking, "Yeah, I've got 4 interviews, but if you're not going to fasten up this one, I'm not going to tell you what I've got on."
Yeah, no, exactly. I think we spoke about it briefly previously, right? Around automations and ATS. If you were to ask somebody, right, as a candidate, what would you prefer, to be pushed along the process in a very efficient and fair manner, or it taking longer, but just having a very human approach? They're probably going to pick the latter, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
they're probably going to pick the first example, where they're being pushed through as as quickly as possible, because you're right. There's so much demand in the market. There's so many things that people are applying for. You're right. You've got so many things on. You'd much rather be pushed through in an efficient and fair manner, than sort of a fluffy email every sort of other day saying, "Hey, we're still waiting on something." So
And that's exactly where the automations come in, because if you're replying to an email, then that triggers the next thing, and they've accepted that. They get sent their handbook and contract, because that's making that thing so much smoother. So once people are onboarded, then it's not, "Oh, you didn't send through your passport." Well, that wasn't on the email that you sent me because you typed it and you didn't include that part. But if it's all sort of in that automation, then the operation is much smoother. Maybe that's why it is a people operation, but I think, yeah, exactly, that automation process, and it's a clear process as well. So if someone was to leave the business and another HR person slotted in, everything's already existing, everything's already there. It's not like you have to scroll through emails of Barbara who left, what she sent to the candidate, and being able to say, "Oh, that's what I'm meant to send." It's like having that ATS, as you said, the automation is key, really, to be able to grow and at a fast speed as well. Because if you're constantly relying on one person to send out a job offer or to send out something, then you're never going to be able to scale.
yeah, I think what you touched on there a second ago was reducing human error, right? I think another thing you touched on there was scalability. So I think they both work hand in hand. To be able to scale, you need to reduce human error as much as you can, and obviously that happens through automations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Scaling is at the heart of every startup, isn't it? So if a startup can have people operations from the get-go and have automations, then their scaling is going to be much easier and efficient than if they were to, do everything by hand. Not just in scaling their people, but scaling their business, their ideas, processes, legalities of everything. If they do that, then it's going to be able to scale at a much stronger speed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm working with a client right now. They're in stealth mode at the moment, and there's no real employees. There's just a bunch of consultants building something at the moment, right? And one of the key things I'm being asked constantly is like, okay, when we grow, when we scale, what do we need to have in place right now? And that's exactly what I'm working on right now. And what I'm saying is, well, you need to have the right processes, platforms, and automations in place now, because that will make everything way easier later on down the line.
Yeah, I think getting that started at the core of your business helps everything on top of that, because if your processes aren't right, then you're going to have to restart everything, and it's going to take much longer than if you just did it like that from the get-go. So yeah, I think that's definitely just making sure those processes are in place before starting anything too big. Maybe if you're going to hire a project manager for a brand new project, it's like, actually, maybe we should just sit down and see what we originally had in place. Is this working? Are we getting the right candidates? If we put up a job application, are the actual applications that we get in, are they right? Do we need to change something here? I think it's that assessment and seeing what data's coming in, processing that. No, these candidates are actually project managers for a work site rather than maybe a product, for example. So it's just making sure that those processes are much stronger, so that your application is stronger and the process is stronger.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Definitely. So yeah, I think moving through that, I think as we've gone from sort of how it's gone from HR to people ops, this strategic business function, I think, is key to people ops. And then I guess it's moving forward and looking at this future of work, what's next for people ops. I think with global and remote work forces, as we've spoken about, I think this impact with the people ops strategies is really key. As we've said, AI, automation, but then also diversity, and inclusion, and then flexibility as well. So I think maybe we should have a little think about what companies should be doing today to future-proof their people ops. So maybe what key trends are shaping the future of people ops. I know we spoke about AI and automation, but yeah, let's just delve into that a little bit further. So, as we're speaking about these admin tasks and the automation and that sort of processes behind things, we also want to be focusing on that employee engagement and experience. So, how do you think people ops play a role in shaping that company culture?
Good question. So, my view is that because people ops is, because people ops takes an operational approach to things, it naturally you're inclined to document it, right? So shaping culture is very much, it's something that should be documented, and it should be something tangible. It shouldn't be something like, oh, we order pizza, we finished, early on a Friday or whatever, or these are things. It should be very much tangible. It should be documented, and I think having a sort of people ops or operational sort of mind lends well to that, because you will, document it, you will question it, like, well, okay, so, but what is this? You can't just say we're like a family, what is the culture here? And the way I like to describe it is like, say, for example, you go to Morocco, right? I went there. That's the last place I went for our mini moon. So I'll use that as an example. You go somewhere like that. Say again.
I went there last year, so we can use Morocco as a great example. We both know.
Awesome. So you go somewhere like Morocco and you come back and people say, how was it? And what do you say? Well, they've got like an amazing culture there, or the culture is very different there. How, or why is that different to how we explain culture in the business workplace, right? Because if you really take it down to sort of first principles thinking, what is that? Well, it's the way that people do things. It's the things that they do. It's the ceremonies that they may have in their day to day. It's the way that they think, act, behave. That's what you're really talking about when you talk about culture. right? So if you're talking about things like the way that people think, act, behave, and sort of, or what they do on a day-to-day basis, and what their the ceremonies are. And I use the word ceremonies in a very typical agile way, but what their ceremonies are, then you can document that, right? So, and if we go back to onboarding as example, something very tangible as part of your onboarding, you should have accepted behaviors. What are our accepted behaviors here? What do we do? What's a good way to work? What's our way of working? How's our rules of async working? That means that any new starter that comes in is on the same page as everybody else. A real tangible example is that one of our ways of working, or async ways of working, is that we don't send messages on Slack outside of people's working hours, right? Which is a big thing if we're working on an international level, right? And you can easily set that up in Slack where you can just time it so it pings and it sends when someone starts their working day. That's a small thing that makes a big difference, and that forms part of the culture, and it's automated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that way of working is key. It's not like the classic, as you say, pizza parties and free coffee. Everyone likes a bit of pizza and coffee, but it's completely shifted. And it's time to look at what shapes someone's actual life, because at the end of the day, people work, majority it's classic 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, but in this new way of working, people want to be able to, if they've got an appointment, to leave at 2 and come back and not be questioned, because it's completely shifted. If you can create a work environment that is activity and success driven, and you can showcase that you've done a project in, it's meant to be 4 hours, but you've done it in 2 and it's successful. It shouldn't be relying on having the time of it. Well, you needed to be sat at your desk for 4 hours. Well, no, I've done it in 2 hours, and I should be able to then have the flexibility to then leave. And I think that's the essential shift as well, being able to be autonomous and having this async work, that if you were to come back on, someone's already, if you ask a question, you go offline, someone from, for example, the USA come on and they answer the question. You're constantly working in a step-by-step motion. It's never halted. I think sometimes in workplaces it becomes quite halted, and people are only waiting on the person above to answer and the person above. But if it's a sort of step-by-step motion, I think that can really help to push things on. If something's completed early, it can really work. But yeah, as you said, that's for an example, Slack is definitely the new communication. I definitely love it. I love all the different channels, and from a people ops perspective, it's having channels. So your work life, pets, holidays. I think that element as well, if you add a bit of personality, people can share their puppies, or as you said, the holiday to Morocco. And if you are remote, you still need to have that element of culture of being able to showcase your new co-working space, your new RemoFirst mug, the swag that you receive. It's good to show it off and still have a sense of community, because without that, you may feel a little bit lost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things you hit on there, right? Number one is sort of output over howput, right? That's something I always say, don't focus on the how, focus on the output, right? There's so many leaders that I work with where they've said, oh, I don't like the way this person's working. And I'm like, well, what's the output like? Yeah, the output's great. They're doing everything on time, but their hours are a bit odd. I was like, so that doesn't matter. I think there's the reason I use that example is because if you focus on the process so heavily, you can sort of almost create something that's too rigid, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you create a framework, right, that sort of people can work within with the flexibility. So focus, documents things and explain accepted behaviors, and really outline what it's like to work async in your organization, but don't focus, don't micromanage, right? So create a framework, right? Don't be so rigid. this is our accepted behaviors, but really you need to focus on people's output, especially when you work remote, right? You need to focus on output because you can't really control output or how they do it, right? You probably would if it was in office. You shouldn't do. You're probably a micromanager if you're doing that. But you should focus on the output. I guess is the overall thing I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think as an employee, you have to showcase and, as you said, document that, because you need to be, the second you go offline, there's proof that you've created a project, or you've set up a Asana task or a Jira task. It's like the evidence is there so that when you're offline and someone wants to find something really easily, it's readily available. Because if you're working on your own in your laptop and it's all on Microsoft Word saved to your computer, nobody's going to know that you've done anything. But these like sort of cloud, Google Docs, Notion, like Asana, shared boards, shared vision, people can then go in, search that, see, oh, that's where we're up to with that. I'll drop that in there. Or if you're going to be off work for the day or for the week, you need to have a seamless process that people can jump in and be able to take that over.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think we take that for granted, right? I don't know, maybe there's a certain generation who takes for granted and some don't, because I remember when I first started working, even if your Excel sheet was in the SharePoint, you had to be like, hey, I'm about to edit this. Can everyone else exit the file? So I can edit it and I'll save it and then I'll close it and then you'll open it and you'll edit it. It used to be the most mind-bogglingly.
And it would be all frozen on your computer and you couldn't access it because Jerry had updated C4 and it made everything.
And then you lose all your work because someone saved it before you did. It was horrible. It was horrible.
And that's the exact shift that we're talking about, the future of work shift. It was HR, a paper CV, faxing it into the one computer that some people have in their office. And it's dramatically changed. And I think like year by year, you can see such difference. And I think it is the key trends of AI, automation, D&I, and that flexibility. What do you think? Sort of, I know we spoke about this key trends, but if there's anything specific for tools or what you think could shape the future of people ops.
Yeah, of course. So we've sort of spoken about AI, right? So you've got AI, and I don't really have an allegiance to a specific AI. I like jump between DeepSeek and ChatGPT and Claude. One thing I'd say is try and use the search function, because there's a function that sort of searches the internet at large as well as its own large language model. But one thing I'd say is get it to do the bulk of the work for you. Get it to like 50-60%, because most of us, we start on a blank page and we don't know where to start. And you're like, okay, how do I get going with this? At least personally me, but I can jump into something and just really improve it, from there on. So that's where your expertise comes in. Really fine tune it, read through the policy or procedure that you're creating and sort of fine tune it for your organization, for the tone that you want and all this other stuff, right? So I'd say just create an account with an AI and start asking it questions, and that's a very easy, simple way to start.
Yeah, I think question asking is key, because if you don't want to rely heavily on templates and things that they create and you want to keep that human element, I think asking those questions of what is the key steps to onboarding a new employee, just having those basics, and then you can shape them. You don't have to have it do everything, or you can maybe see what it gives you as templates and ideas. But I think asking them those questions so you can sort of get into it and start thinking yourself, I think that's key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've spoken with some line managers who weren't really great line managers and use it as a bit of a soundboard and sort of say, I want to give this type of feedback. How is the best way to give this type of feedback? How do I best present this feedback to this type of individual who normally doesn't take feedback in this way or that way? or is this tone correct that I'm using? So, I mean, you can use AI for yourself in a multitude of ways in a typical HR team or a people ops team, and you can, you know, gift it to the organization as a tool, you know, rather than always being there for all your managers, which you can't do, you know, sort of, you know, create, you can, if you really want to deep delve into it, you can create AI agents in some way, and sort of that really embodies the way that you sort of work as an organization, and it can sort of be a soundboard for your line managers. That's AI, right? I think just create an account with either those three that I spoke about, and just start asking it questions. You know, just give it a go. You know, I was actually late on the AI train, and you'd be surprised as to how quickly you can really get going with something like.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even in your personal life, I was asking it to create an itinerary for my Mallorca holiday in 2 weeks' time. It's brilliant. I've had some recommendations from restaurants from there and things like that. You can use it to a crazy extent, and yeah, it's definitely something to utilize while it's
Yeah,
there.
I mean, we went to the Peak District for a long weekend, and I just asked it like, what's a good sort of walk in the Peak District, and it gave me some amazing sort of off the beaten track sort of suggestions.
Yeah, and you can use that as a culture element as well. If you're saying what's some great places to have an engagement trip for employees, and it'll come up with all sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I was really not good at, you know, back when I was like full time internal, and I was like ahead of people, and I sort of used to dread doing the Christmas party, or the sort of the monthly sort of get together, or the quarterly sort of event, because doing events or planning events isn't uh, something that I'm particularly strong at. So this was just a lifesaver for me, because it sort of did it for me, you know.
Exactly. I do love that side of things. So I took on a lot of the Christmas parties. Don't know whether it was meant to be, but yeah, that's my forte in my personal life as well. So
Yeah, of course. So AI is one, I think. I think automations is something that we've talked about extensively. You know, a quick, easy way to get started on this is to sort of just reach out, like understand what platforms you have, and just reach out to your CSMs. You know, your customer success manager for each of those platforms, and sort of say, you know, okay, I've mapped out these platforms that we have. How can yours connect or talk to any one of these, right? You know, if they start talking about APIs and things like that, and if that goes over your head, because it does with me, you know, just this is a great opportunity to sort of step outside of the siloed HR realm and start speaking with someone in the engineering team, or someone in your IT team, or whoever in your organization who is good at sort of, you know, APIs or something technical. You know, start partnering with them and understand the sort of the logic and the sort of the process behind APIs.
yeah, and as an employee sat in the software engineering department, and your HR person comes up to you and says, "Hi, we're trying to integrate this, and this, but we've got too many things. Can you like sort of have a look at it?" And like they're going to be so happy that they're actually being asked, because that showed that their talent is greatly appreciated, not only in the workplace and what they're coding and developing, but also to make their people operations job that bit easier.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I think you'll be surprised as to how welcomed it will be, you know.
Yeah, I think people shouldn't be afraid to ask outside of the HR realm. I think partnering with teams like marketing for employer branding, software development for your APIs, the sales team to see, oh, because maybe they're the quickest hires, surveying with them, working with each team and employing the business to make sure that what you're doing is the smoothest and most efficient process.
I know you touched. Sorry, I know you touched on DEI as well, actually, as another sort of topic. I feel like that's a tough one. You know, it's you're seeing a lot of organisations dropping DEI or EDI sort of initiatives, which is sad. Hopefully, that trend doesn't sort of make it across the pond in a big way. Big shout outs to somebody named Romain Mohammed. He's a great guy. LinkedIn him. He's doing a lot of amazing things on DEI as well. But how can people help with this? Well, I think taking a pragmatic and data-focused approach, which PeopleOps lends itself well to, can help with this, right? If you can look at your organization's data and can prove that having an organization with a varied background can only improve the bottom line, which it does, there's loads of studies that sort of proves that, then you've got a good chance, right? But the unfortunate thing is you sometimes need to convince folks for these initiatives. But I mean, practically, you can use platforms to make hiring way more meritocratic, blind CV reviewing, subconscious bias training as well. Things like subconscious bias training, I think you'd only be able to pick up if you viewed or worked with the organization as a whole, right? Which is PeopleOps, rather than saying, oh, we're not getting, people of a sort of a certain background aren't being pushed through to second or third stage. Okay, maybe we need to sort of change our job specs, which you probably should. Yeah, great, but take outside of your realm and think about who else is in the process. What else could it be? Is it a certain individual who's sort of, dropping certain individuals at that certain stage? Then we need to sort of look at potential unconscious, subconscious, bias training, so that you only really start thinking about those things when you see everything as a whole.
When you start looking at the actual data that's existing there, definitely. And yeah, as you said, there's lots of sort of tools, a gender decoder, and there's stronger words that women supposedly won't apply to in comparison to the different terms that would make certain people apply to certain job roles depending on the wording of that. So I think that's very important because you can utilize, as you say, AI, but maybe AI might not know as much about diversity and inclusion. So you also need the knowledge of this and working together with AI. You don't want to solely focus on something that then might be detrimental to your hiring process because you haven't actually looked at it with a human eye. I think it's definitely a combination of all three, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some great points there. I mean, you overtly masculine language can push people away from applying. You can put it into your AI, obviously. I guess it's about the prompts that you ask it. It's like you need to be able to know to ask the right questions and ask the right things, as you said. Ensure that you're going through it with a fine tooth comb yourself, right? There's data out there that show that a typical male might read a job spec and sort of say, yeah, I sort of tick most of it, I'll apply. Whereas your typical female or woman might look at it and sort of say, oh, I don't tick every single box, I probably shouldn't apply. And funnily enough, I see that exactly in the way that I used to apply to jobs, or my wife used to apply to jobs. It's definitely that case, at least in this tiny little house here that we have. So I think having a statement on your job spec that sort of says, look, you don't have to tick all the boxes, just we want to speak to you.
Definitely. And that will help with the application process, because you might find someone that maybe isn't in the industry that you are in, but they are actually the perfect candidate. They could actually help shape your business better than someone in the industry, someone coming from an outside point of view that maybe doesn't know the industry as well. That is also quite good because they're not blindsided by what's already existing. So I think it's key to have that open box, especially from a HR person and someone reviewing CVs as well. They shouldn't ever focus on something that's only on the job spec. It's definitely worth, applying to something that maybe you don't think you can get the job for. It's definitely something.
Yeah.
Great. So I think those would, if you were to speak about that transition from HR to people ops, I guess this would be exactly where someone would start. having those basic principles, as we spoke about, documenting everything and making sure that that process is smooth. Once you've maybe got that, you could start or utilising AI to help with that process. Once you've got that in place, creating those automations, but making sure that through D&I process and procedures that is throughout the process as well. So I think those three things are key to creating sort of that solid foundation for engaging and retaining employees. So I really enjoy that, how you sort of discuss those three trends and how it would shape people ops. So I guess in a sort of final roundup then, what do you see as the biggest challenge with traditional HR today?
I think the biggest challenge with HR today, it's probably the fear and distrust in people's minds, right? So if I use an example, if somebody in HR comes up to you and says, "Oh, can I have a chat?"
Oh, that puts fear in me, just those words.
There you go. There you go. So I feel like people ops can help change that. And that's not saying call it something else and it solves everything. It's embodying everything that sort of comes with people ops, everything that we spoke about.
Yeah, definitely. I really do see that, and that fear is something that you don't want an employee to be sat every single day with that fear of losing their job, or that fear of you've done something wrong and you're going to be spoken to, because that's just not how you want a workplace to be. So I think that's really key to being able to overcome that. And I guess then, what's one piece of advice you'd give to HR professionals looking to stay ahead? If we could summarize everything in that we spoke about for the last sort of 40 minutes.
If we can summarize it in a couple of words, it would be get curious. So get curious about different departments in your organization. Stop thinking you're a siloed function. Partner with cross-functional teams and learn how they do things. So get curious.
Definitely.
Fight for a seat at that table for organization-wide discussions. That can be a whole different conversation. How do you sort of fight for that seat and those sort of all-important conversations? But really, if I can put it in a nutshell, you need to sort of show that you're providing value outside of HR, and you understand how the business works in general. So I'd say that's sort of some key bits. Yeah.
I also really love the fact about like HR taking time to like sit in people's teams. I think if that was something that was done moving forward, like HR member sat with a certain marketing team, so they see how that day-to-day looks like, so that when they are hiring someone and they're writing that job description, they know instantly whether someone's a great cultural fit for that team. They know what that day-to-day looks like. If it's for creating a podcast, they know that what that is like when you're interviewing someone. So I think that is kind of a good piece of advice for someone starting out, because if they don't know how certain teams work, then they might be struggling to find the right talent, and it's going to be a continuous process of them not knowing the right tech, the right style, the right culture of that team, the right work ethics, the like flexibility, how that's going to work. I think that's a really key good point to integrating HR into like cross-functional work, and so that they can see how everyone is actually working. I think that's really good piece. And yeah, getting curious. I think without curiosity, life would be at a standstill if people aren't asking those questions. And I guess if employees aren't asking those questions to HR as well, you need that continuous curiosity to be able to fuel the growth of a business. So yeah, I really like that. Get curious. It's a good little tagline about how HR is sort of shifting towards that people ops, and how this conversation is really important to today's workplace, because it, as we said, it's gone from traditional pieces of paper and Word documents to AI functionalities and automations. And yeah, if there's any final thoughts that you'd like to sort of drop as we finish this podcast, Jag, absolutely go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Two things. I think, the ops part of me is sort of, screaming out to say, okay, great, this is what you should do. But how do you do it? The how is the most important thing for me. You need to focus on the AI, as we mentioned, and focus on the integrations between your platforms, because that eliminates the day-to-day admin. You need to create some space in your day, in your week, in your month. This will create time and space to pick up those peripheral sort of skill sets. So that's the how, right? So focus on the AI and the self-service and the automations between your platforms. Get rid of that day-to-day drudgery. Don't be afraid that this is going to sort of like leave you like jobless in some way. No, it frees up your time to do more and work on more interesting things. So that's the how. Second thing is, if you go over to HLSTK.com, I'm actually giving out a free People Ops consultation, 30-minute consultation with me to sort of go through the People Ops function, how you can turn it into from HR to People Ops, or the current problems you're facing. So yeah, head over to the website.
Yeah, and that's where the t-shirt comes in. So
There it is. Subliminal messaging.
Yes, love it. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I've honestly thoroughly enjoyed going through the process of that shift, and I think it's going to be key to especially startups and people needing to grow their business successfully. It's key for that transition. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today and tuning in for all the listeners on episode 3 of our podcast, Is HR Dead? Why People Ops is the future. Thank you so much, Jag. And yeah, tune in for our next podcast coming soon, guys. Bye.